I read 14 books this June and DNF'd one, so let's do a reading wrap up. It was a really good reading month for me. Besides the DNF, I don't think any of the books that I read were below 3 stars. I am still binging the John Sandford crime thriller series on audiobook. I read 5 more of those this month. I also read 4 sci-fi/space opera books this month, another 2 lit RPGs, 1 speculative fiction, 1 literary fiction, and 1 nonfiction to mix things up a little bit. So first I'll go through the John Sandford books. These are his Prey novels. I read 5 of them. Oddly enough, I read books 20 and then 22 through 25. That's because I've been getting them through my library, and my library's copy of Buried Prey, which is number 21, was out on loan all month, and so I had to skip it and then come back to it. Out of the 5, I think number 23, Silken Prey, was my favorite. I gave that 4 stars. For whatever reason, I really like the ones where Lucas Davenport, the detective, is investigating, like, political campaign weirdness. There's been a couple of those, and those have really been favorites of mine. I also love the ones that really feature heavily his daughter Letty, who is sort of coming into her own as a potential detective herself. She featured very heavily in Gathering Prey, which is number 25, and so I really like that one as well. That was 3.5 stars. After that, I read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Talents, which is her second book in the Earthseed series. I kind of expected going in that it was going to be a 5-star book because I loved Parable of the Sower so much. It is one of my lifetime favorite books. And I kind of expected that this one was going to live up to it, and it absolutely did. I read Parable of the Sower years ago, and even though I loved it, I've been putting off reading Parable of the Talents because I have this weird thing where if I really love something and there's like one more left in a series, I will procrastinate finishing the series for so long because I just like having it left to read. So I did that for a really long time, but it was finally time for me to read Parable of the Talents, and it really did live up to my expectations. Both of the books were written in the 90s, and they were set in the future then to be in the 2020s, 2030s time period, so basically now. And they are alarmingly relevant to current events. It's a dystopian novel that's about political events that have resulted in essentially societal collapse in America. And there are a lot of strong parallels to what's happening today, to the point where you sort of wonder if Octavia Butler saw the future a little bit. And I knew that was going to make it a little bit of a heavy read because, you know, a lot of the reading that I do is sort of escapist. It helps me not think about the stuff that I have to think about in my day-to-day life or in my work. And so, you know, I almost didn't want to read it right now, but it is still just such an amazing novel. It's not a sort of like everything works out in the end and everyone lives happily ever after, which would be, I think, very unsatisfying, but she does manage to weave in threads of hope and sort of things that make you believe in humanity. So as I kind of expected, it was a 5-star book, and it's definitely been added to my list of all-time favorites along with Parable of the Sower. After that, I read a short literary fiction novel called Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. That was a really interesting book. It's about a character who does not fit in with the rest of the world. She's probably autistic or on the autism spectrum somehow. And she is basically working as a convenience store employee, which she's perfectly happy with, but the people around her keep expecting her to do more with her life, get married or, you know, establish a career that is not working in a convenience store. And it's a really interesting book about how she grapples with that and, you know, sort of deals with the fact that she's perfectly happy, but the people around her expect her to live a different life. It was a really interesting book. It was a sort of a weird book, but not necessarily in a bad way. I gave it 3.5 stars. After that, I've been continuing to work through the lit RPG series Newt and Demon, which you've probably heard me talk about. I absolutely adore it. It is amazing. It is this very cozy slice of life lit RPG with very low stakes. It is just such a comforting read, and I am loving the series. So I finished the 3rd book, which I think was probably my favorite out of the 3. More is happening. The main character, the alchemist Theo, and his partner Tresk, who's a sort of dungeoneer, adventurer, they're both becoming more powerful and are sort of achieving new goals and accomplishing more of what they're trying to do. And I think it's really just been getting stronger as the characters have progressed. Book 3 is the last book that is formally published as an ebook. The rest of the novels are being basically serialized, as many lit RPGs are, on a site called Royal Road. And so I've been continuing to read the series by essentially using a plugin for Caliber, which is an ebook software that compiles those chapters into ebooks so I can keep reading. It's not as polished, it hasn't gone through like the editorial process that I think the author does before publishing them as ebooks, but I'm totally fine with it. Like it doesn't bother me. I just love reading the story, even if there's like a typo once in a while. So I read the 4th book that way. I really loved it. I gave it 4 stars, and I am now on to the 5th book in the series. I think there's about 7 out right now, and I think there will be 8-ish in total, although some of the chapter notes make me think that maybe that'll go on a little bit longer. I hope it does, because I'm totally hooked on it, and I'm going to be so sad when I finish the series. After that, I picked up A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine, which I've been meaning to read for a really long time. That's a space opera. You probably know I love space operas. It was time for me to sink my teeth into another one, and I really enjoyed it. I am often not a big fan of space operas that focus heavily on the politics and sort of the political maneuvering between empires, and that's very much what this book is. So I was actually a little surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because usually they just aren't for me. But this book is really beautifully written. The novel really features language and poetry very heavily in a very interesting way that I really, really enjoyed. I gave it 3.5 stars. So after that, I really wanted more space, more sci-fi, and so I picked up another series that I've been meaning to read for ages, and I don't know why I haven't gotten around to it until now, which is the Murderbot series by Martha Wells, and oh my god, I love it. It had been really heavily recommended to me by like a million different people. Again, I don't know what took me so long to get around to reading it, but I read 3 of those books in like 2 days. They're super short, but they're super good. The series is about a robot, essentially, that calls itself Murderbot. And Murderbot is supposed to be a security unit, or sort of like a bodyguard for, planetary mining operations and things like that. But all Murderbot wants to do is watch media, TV shows and things like that it downloads. And it is just such an amazing novel about its relationship with the humans that it is living among. Somehow it manages to be incredibly relatable, despite being about a robot that says it doesn't really have any feelings or care for humans, although I think it definitely does to some extent. My favorite of the 3 was definitely the 2nd book, Artificial Condition, which features a sort of sentient spaceship named Art. And I swear, if Martha Wells wrote a series that was just entirely about Murderbot and Art, I would read every single one. So Martha, if you're listening, please, I need this. These are really great books. They're absolute page turners. I loved them. Fortunately, there are more in the series, so you'll probably hear me talking about more of those pretty soon, because they are definitely on my to-read list. Finally, I also read a nonfiction book this month, and that was Enshittification by Cory Doctorow. This is actually an advanced copy. The book publishes in October, but I was lucky enough to get a sneak peek at it, and it is so, so good. If you've read and enjoyed any of my writing on how we can build a better web and push back on the sort of abusive practices of the tech industry, then you definitely need to read this book. It is just such an incredible analysis of how we got here, why companies constantly are making their products worse, and then most importantly, what we can do about it, how we can fix it, how we can move forward, how we can build a web that we desperately need. So again, this is going to publish in October, and I would highly recommend picking up a copy. I also DNF'd one book this month, and that was actually CloudCuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, which has been highly recommended to me by a number of people. I know a bunch of people who read it and loved it. I think the problem was that I was trying to listen to it as an audiobook, and I'm beginning to realize that there are some books that work really well for me as audiobooks, formulaic crime thrillers being one of them. And other books, really not so much. Books that change perspectives a lot, where you really have to pay attention very closely or you'll miss things. Because I'm often listening to audiobooks like when I'm walking my dog. I am probably like 90% paying attention to them, which is enough for many books, but not all books. And so I think if I'm going to try CloudCuckoo Land again, I definitely need to get a print or ebook copy. because the audiobook just wasn't working for me. So that was a DNF for now, but I really blame it more on the format and not so much on the book. That was the 14 books I read this month. Definitely let me know in the comments if you read any of those books and what you think of them, or if there are books that you think I should check out, although my to-read list is absolutely out of control and far longer than I will ever be able to read, but I still love getting recommendations. And I'll see you next month for July's reading wrap-up.